Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Feature Crew. Today is another exciting day. Big release from OpenAI. We got O3-Pro mode. This is our first Pro mode model/release in months at this point. And so we're very excited to see how the performance of O3 is elevated by Pro mode. We've noticed that O3 is very good at some things, still in progress on other things. And so we'll see where Pro mode shines. So we've got O3-Pro loaded up. It's only available to the Pro subscription, which is the $200 a month tier. So hopefully this video is useful to a lot of you because we're breaking the bank for this one. We've heard on Twitter that this model can reason for 15 plus minutes, so we'll get started right away.
So in the interest of time, we've gone ahead and just cut through. We've sent our usual city prompt, which contains basically, we want to make a procedural city generation. So we're looking here for the ability to actually render a gaming surface. We want the ability to tweak params. We're hoping that these more intelligent reasoning models can take in more of the prompt. So we will open source this as we usually do. We did see it took 15 minutes to reason. So it's not unreasonable what we've been seeing on Twitter. So we'll go ahead and render this and see how it goes.
All right, moment of truth.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So, we see different districts in the building. It seemed to try to put some sort of river in, which is nice. Unfortunately, it's bugging out. A classic problem we see with a lot of these models is the cars are just driving through buildings.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate to see. What I will say is that, like, the actual structure of the buildings and then the way that there are these different districts, some taller buildings, some shorter buildings, it looks pretty nice. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily the best we've seen, but it's a pretty good one.
And then we'll try top right. It looks like they've added some ability to modify the simulation. So we've got density, speed, rain, snow. Right now, it's taking quite a lot of our tasks literally. Like we said, hey, like add the ability for weather, for example, rain and snow. And it looks like it's just a tick box as opposed for simulating other things. So it looks like, it's kind of like droplets falling. That could be rain or snow. Did the density do anything when you slid it? Not seeing any change.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any way to cause a regeneration.
Sandbox, can we tick that? Build with a click?
I'm very interested in if this does anything.
Well, that's kind of
I can build in.
You can just build on the road.
That road is closed.
That road is okay.
So
it just adds anything on the grid? Can you?
It's just like always the same size building.
Okay. Well, again, I think it's kind of strangely taking a lot of things literally here. And to be clear, this is certainly not the most impressive one shot we've seen.
Car driving in the river.
Car drive, yeah. Bit unfortunate, kind of assumption, especially when you have like a 15-minute reasoning time, is to get something better than what you get from like an O3. But right now, this seems, I wouldn't call it necessarily like strictly worse, but it's no step change better. So we just waited 15 minutes for something that right now seems pretty similar to existing state of the art.
The only plus I'll give it is that Sandbox has always been in the prompt and always falls out.
Yeah.
And so in terms of like respecting the requirements, it's slightly better at that. I don't know if it was worth the 15-minute wait, but for Sandbox mode, like that's something that's been in the prompt forever. And,
we've never seen anyone do it on them.
And then when I'm looking at the top left, like, I'd have to dig into the code to see what's actually going on behind the scenes, but it does seem to have a little bit more of a simulation going on. It shows us how many vehicles there are, the population, the jobs. I was seeing the population change a little bit before, but it seems to be changing more slowly, so maybe more realistic. Often when we do these, the model doesn't really think through the speed, and we see population like skyrocketing. It doesn't really make any sense. So usually on these sorts of tests, we do multiple rounds of feedback. Because of the really long load time, we are going to push it really hard and go straight to challenge mode. And so we're giving it a pretty short but intense prompt. We're asking it to make it a full-fledged game with deeper and more complex city simulation, engaging gameplay loop and goals, and then improvements to the UI and visuals overall. So we'll send that off, and you can see the bar really slowly creeps in. So we'll come back to you in probably 15 minutes once this is done.
Okay, we're back with the city.
After 21 minutes, 22 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
So it claims that it's turned it into a playable game loop. It does say vertical slice. I'm not sure what that means.
We've noticed, and maybe we can copy the conversations, the way it kind of discusses things outside of like the code, it is quite different from other models. Like they have instruction fine-tuned it slightly different. The details pane also seems weird. It only works at the end, it seems. That could just be a day one bug though. I assume it's like making these summaries as it goes on.
Right. Okay, let's load it up and see what happened.
Yeah.
Moment of truth.
Is it rendering in?
We might have to...
Cannot use an import statement outside of... Can we build? Can you click build road or house? Top right.
Oh, look at this.
It's kind of like a Sim City kind of thing. Can you build a road between them? Maybe.
The roads look to be floating.
And then you can build a factory, slightly
This is a
bigger,
gray box.
and a park, which is a green box. We now have 15 jobs.
We need to build houses. Little residential district here. It's very dark.
We've reached 100 population, so something happened with our goals and $1,000 in tax.
And we got 80% happiness.
Yeah, we're ticking up and stuff. Achieve 2,000 population win. So I guess we're just gonna keep building houses.
How much money do I have?
You've got 400. Is at the top left.
Okay, we need more jobs then. It's just like a simple 3-tiered simulation game, like a triangle of like, you know.
You're supposed to build a power plant, but it's not even clear if you can build a power plant.
I do wonder if like you get to a certain amount of.
Yeah.
There was an error. I think we should call that out. There was an error where it can't import code from outside a module.
This is confusing to me. It's
confusing because it got rid of the procedurally generated city.
So like we were commenting on the last thing that it did quite a good job of like compared to other like first shots. It tried to incorporate features, but now given the context and then said, hey, here, like continue to expand this into a game. It's taken its own liberty and just removed some of the stuff from the prompt. And to be fair, we gave it intentionally ambiguous instructions to see how it deals with it. But I don't know. Again, my knee-jerk reaction is this was not worth the 21 minutes worth of wait.
Yeah.
We could probably get this certainly out of any existing O3 class models, Gemini, Claude, whatever.
Or O3 itself.
Or O3 itself. That's why I'm like, just so far, we'll continue with other testing, but we haven't really seen a massive gain. This is not necessarily a bad result, at least it kind of rendered and...
Yeah, but it dropped the whole procedurally generated city.
Yeah, so...
Which is very, I get that if it's making a simulation game, it starts to think like Sim City and...
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to start you with a flat plane, but that's not how all city simulation games work. And especially in a context where there is a whole procedurally generated city that it's basing this off of.
Yeah.
I would expect there to be something here.
People might argue that like with these pro class models and other reasons, you have to do it differently. But I do still think there is a case where we shouldn't have to go restate everything and give like a massive essay. It should be kind of intuitive that we said continue on from all the stuff you have, and that would be kept in context, right? So
right. And this is where we would usually keep following up and be like, all right, now integrate the building and game features of that one with the procedurally generated elements of the first one and, combine it together just with as Dylan was saying, with 20-minute wait time. We're just going to have to move on to our next test, which is business reasoning. So switching over to our business reasoning test, we did the same thing as the first test where we pre-ran the prompt. Our business reasoning test has 2 legs to it. The first thing we do is have the model conduct an investigation and gather a bunch of information about the most up-to-date models across companies, information about those models, trends in the industry. And then once it gathers all that information, then we have it conduct analysis, generate charts, and make recommendations. And so we've done this first part where we had Pro do the research, and we asked with the same sort of format we always do. And it reasoned for, again, about 15 minutes. Now, the weird thing is it missed a lot. It was a very disappointing response. So it found only 4.0 and 4-Turbo as OpenAI models. It didn't even find itself. It found a more reasonable set of Google's. It missed Claude 4 altogether. So this was a really sort of bad response. And after 15 minutes of searching and reasoning, we were expecting way more and saw way more out of O3 not Pro.
So just because we were a bit confused about how O3-Pro missed some stuff, there has been an update today about making O3 cheaper. So we went ahead and reran O3 just for, a comparison point. It reasoned for 2 minutes, which is about standard. But we just noticed as well that it did the same kind of thing. It's missed a lot of the O series models.
A little bit more up to date.
It's a little bit more up to date, but this is certainly not as good as what we had seen, when we did this a couple of weeks ago when we were testing O3 and so on.
But with state of the art, it should have the O models.
It should have O models, O4 at minimum, right? Because that's like their state of the art.
Maybe it's self?
If it can. We do note that. So switching back to O3 Pro, you can have a look at the details tab and you can see that it's done all these searches. And on top of that, we just noted that for Apple, it's got WWDC. And if you check this link, it is, really up to date, like a today sort of link.
So it can search.
So it can search. We know it's search, but it's surprisingly quite shocking that it's not gotten like O-series models. The fact that there's no reason is here, and it instead references Turbo, it's such a weird response. So we're a bit surprised here. It seems almost like a regression in the ability to do this kind of information gathering, which is the first part of our business reasoning test.
But then I think it's important to note that, yeah, maybe a regression in O3 Pro, we were very confident going back to O3, and yet we're still seeing, while the O3 performance was slightly better than the O3 Pro, weird regression there. If you check out our original O3 video, this performance here is significantly worse than the original O3 video. It wasn't missing any models. So we will continue with this response from O3. We'll switch the model to O3 Pro and test it with the data that O3 was able to gather. Now, even though it's not fully up to date, it has enough here to go off of and do some interesting analysis. We can still see how good O3 Pro is at creating charts and making business recommendations, just with this caveat that it's not going to have any information about reasoners.
So we just sent through the next part, which is, as Jacob was explaining, we're now trying to analyze the information. So even though we're using the data for O3 just because it's slightly more up to date, this is now sending an O3 Pro request with the same context. So again, this looks like it'll take about 15 minutes. Fingers crossed. So this model is able to do tool calling and stuff. So we do expect some charts to probably appear and render in the chat. Let's see how it goes.
What is this constellation it made? It finished with its analysis and chart generation. We are going to take a second to look through this, but our initial reaction is like, what is going on here? So give us a second. Take in this constellation yourself for a minute. Now, we got a little bit distracted with our initial reaction by these charts because they are not great. The first one is trying to graph accuracy over time, and then it makes a very simple linear projection. It took MMLU as like the single god metric, even though there were some other benchmarks mentioned in the source data. So not the most useful on the first chart. The second chart is slightly more useful. It's a price performance landscape. Again, it's using MMLU 5-shot accuracy as its only metric. So interesting to see that it didn't do what other models try to do and sort of collapse a bunch of different benchmarks or metrics to get a more comprehensive view. But at least this one seems a little bit more useful. If I can see where a small subset of the models in the data land. While the charts aren't the greatest, moving on to the recommendations, we'll walk through quickly. It starts with some analysis of the charts and the data at like a higher level, talking about how raw performance continues to climb as new models are trained both through scaling and distilling. It sort of back justifies its projection a little bit. Then it talks about, price for performance is fragmenting, and a lot of the rest of the analysis sort of indexes on this.
Yep.
It starts to talk about the different price levels and the different performance tiers of models, which is actually very useful for sort of a business trying to figure out what model to use. Moves on to its recommendations, and it breaks down the recommendations in a very interesting way. It starts to talk, like most of these models do, in terms of the specific use cases, but the use cases it broke it into are much more real, in my opinion. Often we'll see something like, use this for coding, use this for everything else, use this for things that don't matter. And while there are some similar trends here, it broke out document summarization into its own thing. It recommended chat, summarization, internal BI dashboards as a specific metric, and then it's talking about privacy-sensitive use cases, which is something businesses care about. We haven't really seen that come out in the analysis before. And then back of office is these tests don't matter example, but it's presenting it in a way where these are actual tests that are used, as opposed to no business says these tests don't matter. So the recommended models, we won't go through line by line, but it did a pretty good job with both the models it recommended and the reasoning for why in a way that would be useful to a business. It talks about a migration path. This was a little bit less interesting to me, but it did sort of offer some actionable insights.
The language it speaks with is, again, like mirroring what we talked about one time about it being kind of like a consultant or something you would see in like an executive report. It is quite authoritative. We maybe think it's trying to cite things and removing it. Compared to other OpenAI models, the formatting is a little bit weird.
Yeah, there's
like
sometimes a space before the period at the
sometimes
end.
British spelling.
Yeah.
So don't know what's going on with that. Could just be, again, like the first kind of reaction is just we're seeing kind of weird things pop up. But there's certainly a language change.
And on the key takeaways, this is great. It's giving these like sort of longer time horizon recommendations and insights. First, it's talking about frontier accuracy, how it's changing over time, how it's still compounding, and how we're expecting near perfect MMLU. While we might, you can quibble over whether you expect that or not, the fact that its recommendations are very in line with both its analysis and its charts is good to see. And then the cost is collapsing, particularly at the bottom end. It's very true, and it should impact how businesses use different models. Whereas, and there's an important sort of implication here that cost is not yet collapsing at the top end. And so that difference will change how you approach different tasks or different use cases. And instead of saying hybrid approach, basically any LLM recommendation, it just hedges and goes, do a hybrid, use something for something. It uses much more precise language here and use a tiered inference approach. It's talking about like the low cost option, and it had already, laid out for what exactly you should use the low cost options for. And then the premium model, exactly for what types of tasks you should use that for. And then it's kind of summarizing that in the key takeaways here. And so in terms of the textual analysis and representation that it gave us, while the original charts weren't blowing us away, you can check out our Claude 4 video for much more impressive charts. This is potentially the most useful analysis we've seen, even though the input data wasn't as complex as sometimes it is. So I would expect, and you can run this on your own and let us know what you see, that if you had information about all the reasoners and, maybe even a wider set of models, that this analysis quality would hold and maybe even be more useful and more actionable. So after some struggles on both the coding and the first leg of business reasoning, I'm finally starting to see where you might sometimes want to wait for a 15-minute O3-Pro request. So with that, we want to get a more general view of its reasoning capabilities. In the past, we've used our maze test for that. So we'll switch over and see how well it does. Switching over to our maze test, regular viewers of the channel will know that we have this maze tool. We can generate a maze, copy a text version of it, and send it to a model, which is what we've done here. Again, pre-sent for O3-Pro. Now, this is our first time getting back to it, and we just noticed that while it finished reasoning, it never responded.
Do anything.
It was 15 minutes of reasoning and then silence, and refreshing doesn't seem to do anything. So this is a 30 by 30 maze, larger than any models have ever been able to complete before. I think we're gonna give it one more shot.
Yeah, let's try it,
and then come back to it in another 15 minutes and see. But this is really concerning.
I mean, kind of shocking performance here. Especially, we can't state enough, this is 15 minutes in between requests. It's a long time. What happened when you come back and it says finish reasoning? There's nothing. What was it doing for so long? Now, it is release day, so maybe there's the caveat that, everyone's heading O3-Pro, but, this is OpenAI. They usually do releases pretty well.
And the scale can't be that large. This is a $200 subscription.
Yeah,
right?
So the number of users must be much smaller. And we'll send this off again. We are trying to push it with 30 here because, again, we expect there to be at least a bit of a performance improvement on it thinks for 15 minutes. So I doubt that it failed because it was too hard. So we'll just have to see. But frankly, kind of disappointing results so far. Looks like, let's just
try it again.
Try it again and see if this results in it actually coming back.
Okay. So after 13 minutes of reasoning, it was able to actually reply, which is great to see, considering it failed the first time. Dylan seems skeptical at its abilities.
Let's see. I mean,
should we first check and see if it... Oh, nothing in the reasoning.
Nothing in the reasoning. Interesting.
Okay.
Because we've seen a lot of these models use code to get through it. So I'm assuming it's coding or using that tooling, but it's not coming up here.
Sure hope.
Let's see. So we're going to enter the plan. Again, this is 30 by 30, so the biggest maze we've done before.
And the tool allows us to show the best solution. We'll check that after we see if it even has a valid solution. Okay.
Ooh,
all right.
Good job. So it at least does 30 by 30 off the bat. And
plan is valid, and then we'll check the best solution. And it is the exact best solution. So, I mean, with the coding tools, I think the important thing is with the coding tools, doing some sort of A-star pathfinding is kind of trivial for them once they're able to set up the code correctly. So the important piece of this reasoning is not really solving the maze just through reasoning. It's being able to reconstruct everything from the input data, build this mental map, quote, mental map of the maze, its structure, and then be able to input that into code that successfully implements some sort of maze solver. We were able to see that happen here. This was able to go further than any other model in the past. And so while I would kind of expect it to be able to keep going. I'm not sure where its limits of being able to copy a maze from text into code is, but it's a very different test these days than it was when we first created it. And we were purely relying on the model's ability to reason through the path and, not use tools to solve it.
Yep. And again, we hope that eventually they will show what tools are used. I would at least like some insight to know that, even if it just says, I use code to be able to do this, right? To show the tool call or whatever, that would be a lot better. Because right now we just have nothing. I guess we're kind of assuming it must have done code. I can't imagine it typed everything out. Like if you remember, older reasoners would be like, I'm thinking about this, and does this path work? No, it doesn't. And that's why they failed at like 5, 6. Now most reasoners, as Jacob said, will build up a world, actually like find an algorithm. So kind of disappointing that we don't get to see the information, the details, but congrats to the model for getting, I think, again, this is the biggest we've done on the channel, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So it's we started off a little shaky. It's pulling through a little better. So after 3 tests and about 2 hours of just waiting for prompts to come back, I'm having trouble figuring out exactly how to feel about O3 in terms of
O3-Pro.
Yeah, O3-Pro. In terms of first impressions, because that's really what it is here. We've only been through a couple prompts. I'm not going to be using it for single shot coding, at least for like single file demo stuff. What I want to do is, try it on some longer specs where it sets up a whole project. That's the kind of thing that I would find large models to be useful for in the past. There are definitely some glimmers through our tests here of like sort of best performance on business reasoning portion, best performance on maze. So that kind of extrapolates to best performance on long-term tool usage. So I want to see this in agentic applications as well. All that said, I'm struggling to figure out where like a 15-minute inference time with no opportunity for me to see what's going on and redirect if necessary is really fitting, especially when some of its performance is just not even stacking up to O3 or O4 mini. These like way more accessible, way more usable versions of what it is.
And to be fair, like they kind of, if I remember correctly, pitched that for the Pro series, right? Like we're just going to crank up intelligence and you can go ahead and use, but it's probably not going to be useful for most people. It's behind the Pro subscription, $200. It's probably for enthusiasts. In this case, again, like I agree, like I don't really know what we'd use it for. Kind of hand waving here saying that it could be the most intelligent, right? In that business reasoning and world understanding. It might not come through in evals, but maybe people who like really take the time to drop in a certain kind of context and rely on certain kinds of prompts might find better performance. But it's hard to say that this is a good like generalist intelligence bump, right? It's hard to actually tell just because it takes so long to run.
Definitely cannot recommend getting the $200 subscription to use this model. As Dylan said, it's not going to be some knock your socks off intelligence bump. My best recommendation for where to try this would be beyond that sort of build a repo sort of prompt. Basing this on the really good business analysis and recommendations, I would say, if you're looking for reports or recommendations, or you're looking for a model that will explore a bunch of different paths and then give you a comprehensive analysis, maybe use this there, especially if you already have the data or a spec in the sort of coding vein.
It probably does well with lots of context.
Yeah.
So maybe if you've got like a ton, like hundreds of pages of context and you're like, I need to think about this deeply, maybe that's where it starts to shine because it can keep that context, can reason, can give you actual actionable insights or like smartness. That could be useful. Very interesting release. Like it's hard. Like, I don't necessarily know if it's like really good or really bad. And that's a very strange feeling to have. Like it might have its uses, but maybe that's why they didn't massively announce it or whatever. It just is potentially a small intelligence increase.
I think maybe as Dylan's talking here, I agree. And I think maybe I'm most excited to try this on like government document dumps. Right? Feed them all in and give me the analysis, and we'll see. I'm very interested to see the audience, what you guys use this for, if you're able to find any great uses, or if you're just defaulting to the O series or the Claude models or Gemini. Definitely let us know what you're seeing in the comments. We'll continue to do follow-ups as we learn more about this model and comparing it to other models that are available. As always, we hope you liked the video. If you like to give it a like, if you want to follow along and see our future videos, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you.